MMA is definitely an interesting sport, but you never know what might happen and which direction the fight will go to. All the fights can't be interesting to watch, right? Some of them are great, some of them are terrible, and some of them are the worst fights in the world. Actually, we have two examples for you. Either the fight can be boring to watch and the crowd will boo, either it looked like a bar fist fight, a wild brawl, or a toe-to-toe war. There are a few interesting ones on our list, and welcome to the Worst MMA Fights. Believe me, if somebody said these guys fought like a woman, it would have been a big compliment. Number 5. Kimbo vs Data 5000, Bellator 149. Bellator 149 was held on February 19, 2016 in Toyota Center, Houston, Texas. Kimbo and Dada 5000 was a promising fight, but both men had to cut an enormous amount of weight. Since the beginning it was clear that this won't be a good match to watch, but nobody expected one of the first MMA fights in the history of the sport. Dada 5000 had a big mouth heading into the fight. He was talking about his training all the time and believed he'd wrecked Kimbo Slice. Both fighters came out of street fighting background, so when two bullies face each other, it should be a street clash, right? A toe-to-toe war or a wild brawl? Well, not this time. I mean, we didn't expect a technical fight, but they literally did nothing. Both fighters guessed very early on. They were throwing punches underwater, there was no action at all. The fight lasted for 3 rounds, but it was one of the worst MMA fights in the history of the sport. Then Kimbo missed with a punch and Dada collapsed on the canvas in a bizarre fashion. He was hospitalized for 2 weeks after his heart stopped, but also suffered dehydration and kidney failure. He became the first MMA fighter who nearly died out of the exhaustion in the octagon. Number 4. Ali Mahmoud vs Kiyoshi Tamura, Pride 29. Pride 29 took place in Saitama, Japan on February 12, 25th. Ali Mahmoud came from a wrestling background, yet this fighter was jumping all the time as if he had some kind of seizure. Mahmoud even propelled his own nuts into the rival's knee. The referee stopped the fight and he was given 5 minutes to recover. Yet he called the fight off due to a groin shot, but the fight was restarted again. Mahmoud continued promoting bunny hoops and even landed a great punch at one moment of the game. But Ali was gassed again. He retired for the second time, but the ref looked sleepy and didn't notice, so the two continued fighting. Yet he stopped at the corner and asked from corner to throw in the towel. Ali Mahmoud has had no match since. It was one of the worst MMA fights, but also one of the funniest at the same time. Kiyoshi Tamura won it via TKO, retirement. Number 3. Gabi Garcia vs Lady Tapa, Rising Fighting World Grand Prix Izonomai. Rising Fighting World Grand Prix Izonomai was held in Saitama, Japan on New Year's Eve 2015. It should have been a holiday spectacle, but it quickly turned to something different. Both ladies were giants in their divisions. Gabi Garcia trained hard for months with the former champion, but as soon as the bell rang, she forgot everything she learned, and the clash turned into one of the worst MMA fights. Both women were swinging like street bullies. Lady Tapa delivered harder shots in the beginning. Gabi Garcia was rocked, but she recovered swiftly. She landed a reverse back fist. I've never seen this kind of KO before, actually, even in Muay Thai martial art. I don't know what this strike is, but okay. Tapa went down like a wrecking ball and Garcia climbed to the top of her. Garcia put her left hand on an opponent's head and continued delivering some weird hammer fists until the referee stopped the fight. I mean, the match was far from boring, but the lack of skills and funny strikes are the reason this was put on the list of the worst MMA fights. Number 2. Gabriel Gonzaga vs Kevin Jordan, UFC 56. Well, it was a pretty much promising fight and Gonzaga's UFC debut. Gabriel Gonzaga has never been known as a cardio machine, but this time he was really disappointing. You can't say he didn't look excellent in the fight's beginning. Gonzaga scored an early takedown. He was actively working to finish the rival via ground and pound or submission. The clash was held at UFC 56 on November 19, 2025, but lack of stamina on both sides turned his clash into one of the worst MMA fights. Both fighters had no more gas tank left at the middle of the first round. The most interesting part of the fight since then was the commentator. The crowd was yelling go home for the most of the match. Herb Dean warned both fighters many times and even threatened with point abduction. Yet Napao delivered tremendous Superman punch at the end of the third round. He knocked his rival out and won in one of the worst MMA fights. If I was a referee, both men would have been disqualified due to timidity. Number 1. Francis Ngannou vs Derrick Lewis, UFC 226. Well, we expected a lot more from the co-main event of UFC 226 on July 8, 2018. Yet Francis Ngannou looked scared since the beginning of the match. He switched stance and evaded his rival. We thought he will punch Lewis hard, but that didn't happen. For 3 rounds, the Predator was missing and going backward. It looked like he doesn't even want to fight Lewis at all. Here is one more shocking fact. Ngannou struck his rival only 11 times. I mean, come on. I think no fighter threw a smaller number of attacks during the 3-round bout in the history of this sport. This was one of the worst MMA fights ever. Both fighters were insulted heavily after the match. Joe Rogan even stated that this was the worst match he has ever seen. Derrick Lewis threw more strikes and won the match via unanimous decision. Oh, but don't worry, both fighters were heavily booed. I mean, they wrecked the whole co-main event of the evening, man. What kind of fighters are you, dumbasses? As well as you know, in modern MMA, you will rarely see 2 fighters who became guests early on, but don't forget that the fights of ground and pound experts can be bored too. Not to mention clinch experts, for example Kamaru Usman or Tyron Woodley, when they were holding each other for a whole round. Thanks God Mark Goddard was the referee and he was separating them. For example, every Jake Shields or Khabib Nurmagomedov fight are boring. When they trap their rival on the floor, better take a pillow with you. We hope you liked our list of the worst MMA fights. Do you agree with our choice? Did we miss some boring match? Do you have the rival? Do you have some recommendations for us? Don't forget to rate and subscribe, and please follow us on besttoplistsbg.com.